Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it. And thank you to the Perrot Library and to Kevin for making this possible. So I actually will jump right in. I'm going to start a little bit of a presentation here, and bear with me for a second and we will get it started. So I think you can see it and see me. This is the cover of my book. The book is actually 248 pages. It's got 156 different photographs by 65 different photographers. So it really is a small art book, which is what this is the way I felt that this field needed to be representative. It's a very visual medium and needed a very visual presentation of it. So the subtitle basically says what the book is about: the Henson festivals and their impact on contemporary puppet theater. But people say, why did you call it Out of the Shadows? And the reason is that at the time of the festivals, we felt that puppet theater for adult audiences really wasn't as well known as it should be. And it was our goal to really bring it out of the shadows. So it could have been called Turn on the Lights, Main Stage. It could have been called a lot of different things. But for me, Out of the Shadows not only references it being less well known than it should be, but also an important form of puppetry, shadow puppetry. So I was kind of playing with both. 2020 is the 20th anniversary of the last Henson Festival and 30 years since Jim Henson died. People are usually pretty surprised that it's been that long, and most people that I talk to can remember where they were when they heard that. The book is dedicated to Jim Henson and Joe Papp. Joe Papp, the founder of the Public Theater, two geniuses who both passed before the festivals actually came to fruition, but without whom they never could have happened. I have a funny story about the start of that, which was that Jim Henson wrote a letter to Joe Papp saying, we really think we'd like to do this festival at the Public Theater. It's the perfect place for it. At that time, there were 5 small theaters, and it was just perfect scale for what we were doing. And so we sent this letter and asked for a meeting to be arranged. Joe Papp came. The meeting was Jim Henson, Cheryl Henson, myself, and Joe Papp. Joe hadn't even walked into the room before he said, great idea, we should do it. So what do we talk about? And that's very indicative of the kind of person that he was, and also that Jim Henson was, being able to do things based on their word and based on a handshake, and a critical element of that success. The photo that you're looking at actually is a scene from Peter and Wendy by Mabou Mines, which was adapted by Liza Lorwin and directed by Lee Brewer, a genius theater director who actually just passed away recently. The actress shown is Karen Kandel, who narrated all of the parts. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the festivals, I'll just throw out a couple of stats just to frame the scope of it. So between 1992 and 2000, that's when the festivals took place, there were 5 festivals. Over the course of the festivals, we presented 156 different productions in 24 theaters throughout New York City. Over 120,000 people attended New York performances. Nearly 400,000 saw the companion exhibitions, and another 100,000 attended festival on tour performances, which were actually seen in 19 different cities across the country. As Kathy so beautifully said, I served as producing director of all 5 festivals, working with Cheryl Henson, Jim's daughter, who served as executive producer. Okay, so first, I'm just going to start with, so what's a puppet and why do I care about this field? The definition of a puppet, I just use the classic Bill Baird definition. We then try to break the rules everywhere you could go. But the basic definition of a puppet still is from Bill Baird, which is that a puppet is an inanimate object, inanimate figure that is made to move by human effort before an audience. So that's a pretty broad swath, but that's our starting point. And I'm assuming that many of you have different levels of knowledge about this. I wrote the book hoping that it would be for all levels of understanding. I wrote it as a strong history for practitioners in the field, but also as a point of entry into this field that I really love. So I'm pretty sure that many of you are a lot more familiar with puppets than you think. And as I've been talking about the book, I've realized that that is the case. I'm showing this one example. Obviously, many of you travel and travel internationally when we could do that, and hopefully we will be again soon. And there are traditions throughout the world of traditional puppet theater. This slide that I'm showing right here is a mask. It's as it says, a sea lion to human transformation mask, and it's from the native tradition of the Tlingit people in Juneau, Alaska. What's interesting about this to me, and the reason I just pulled it out as one of the only traditional ones I'm going to show, is that you can see the two forms to the side of the face. And when they're closed, in this case, it is a sea lion. When they open, it's pulled by strings. And when those strings are pulled to open up, you're seeing that human spirit inside. It's a human face, but it's a human spirit. There's a lot that's been traditionally very spiritual about puppetry. These are 3 classic Javanese shadow puppets. That center form is a kion, or tree of life, and it begins and ends each performance. What I think is particularly interesting about shadow theater, and specifically the Indonesian, well, a couple of things. One is that they are 2-dimensional objects. They are actually flat, shown behind a screen. And they really are the 2 dimensions. They bring you from that corporeal world, of the 3-dimensional world of humans, into this spirit world that they're going to portray. The other thing that's really interesting about these is in Indonesia, the puppeteer is called a dalang, which is also akin to a priest. He officiates in many different rites of passage. So puppetry is, for me, I believe puppetry is the perfect union of the theater, which puts ideas into action, and the visual arts, which give them form. It really does employ all of the arts. It's kind of a perfect world unto itself. It does involve the sculpture, painting, costuming, music. I think of the only thing that that actually comes that is as complete is opera, and I think it's very interesting. I'll talk about it a little later, but some of the great puppeteers or puppet directors are also doing opera, and it's really no surprise to me that that would be a logical direction. One of the things also that for me makes puppetry so beautiful is that, well, a couple of things again. One thing is that the audience needs to get invested in this. The audience really has to accept that this inanimate object has just been given life. So they're co-creators of this wonderful theater, and that makes them very invested in it, which is wonderful. They also are, puppetry is a great way to portray emotions visually. I have this slide up. This is Wojciech on the High Veld by Handspring Puppet Company from South Africa. It was directed by William Kentridge. And in this particular production, at this scene, the puppet Wojciech is painstakingly setting the table. He's putting the knife very precisely. He's putting the cup very precisely. And behind him, it's going crazy. All of the images are just going wild. And it's really showing what's going on internally for him. And I've never seen anything quite as poignant in showing this, this effect. This other one is also the same company, Handspring Puppet Company. These are 2 productions. We'll talk about him later afterwards, but William Kentridge has become very well known as a visual artist and also opera director at this point. But we were very proud to have brought the Wojciech on the High Veld. That was the first time his work was being seen in the US. This is Ubu and the Truth Commission. And the reason I picked this one out is a slightly different PowerPoint of puppetry. That figure, what's happening in this story is that they're telling the harrowing tales. These people are telling their tales to the Truth Commission. So they're telling about horrible scenes that happened to them under apartheid. The translators are doing it very monotone, repeating what the people have said. But the words are really, really powerful. And I believe that with these figures, these rough-hewn figures, you were able to take in this language in a way that you couldn't possibly have if you were really looking at humans saying that. So I think it both gives a little room and it gives a little more point of connection. It's an interesting thing that it does both. So then, I'll go straight to, if you think you have had no exposure to contemporary puppet theater, I thought I would show you a few examples that you probably do know. This is actually by the same company, Handspring, but this is Warhorse, which was certainly a major hit in both London and New York, and actually throughout the country after it was at Lincoln Center Theater. The reason I include this actually is also that this is one of the shows that, in a way, it certainly was not part of the festivals, but it was an outgrowth of some of our work. So one of the theaters that we worked with for Festival on Tour, which I mentioned, is the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. And Alicia Adams, their vice president for programming, had worked with us on the piece I just showed, Ubu and the Truth Commission, and fell in love with working with Handspring, and invited them to come do a property that she knew about, which at the time that was called Tall Horse. And it was the first time that they worked with these giant puppets. Then the people from the National Theater saw that the production of Tall Horse and said, oh, we really have to do this. And they came up with Warhorse and invited them to do the what became a 2011 Tony Award winner for Best Play. So a major undertaking. This one is probably a little less obvious, but I like not obvious. Robert Lepage did perform, I'll get to it later, but did perform solo in the fifth festival. But this is, I hope most of you saw it because I thought it was brilliant. The Ring of the Nibelung. This is his production at the Met. I think it was pretty controversial. I loved every bit of it, but I know it was controversial at the time. And part of what was controversial is part of what I really love about it, which is they called this set the Machine, and because it became all kinds of different things. And I actually asked, for the book, I did about 35 different interviews with artists, and Robert was one of them. And I asked him in that call, I said, somebody mentioned that maybe you could think about this as an Uber marionette, which is an idea of, that was put out in the early 1900s by a set designer, Gordon Craig. And I think Craig, from my understanding, wanted the Uber marionette because he wanted to get rid of those egotistical actors on the stage and have a little more control over his actors, since puppet actors are created, so he could create them the way that he wanted. But the beauty of this, so anyway, I asked Robert, I said, I know it's probably a little crazy to ask you this question, but what do you think about the set being thought of as an Uber marionette? And he said, absolutely, it totally is. He said, it becomes so many different things. And while everybody focused on the fact that there were these incredible hydraulics and electronics going into it, there are actually a lot of puppeteers and stage hands that are working all of these things to make them turn into these different permutations. So I thought that was kind of fun. And then the last one for things that you may well have heard of or seen, this is Basil Twist's Symphonie Fantastique, which was done at Here Arts Center. And this was, it got rave reviews in the New York Times. It was kind of breakthrough. And I'll talk about him a little later because he's doing some amazing things at this point. Other excellent main stage examples, of course, are The Lion King. And we'll talk about Julie Taymor's work in other areas. But The Lion King, and then in opera, Madame Butterfly, and William Kentridge actually went on to recently directed Wozzeck, which is a new interpretation of the same material that we've presented back in 1994 of Wojciech called Wojciech and the High Veld. So I'm hoping that as you're seeing this and you're or you read the book, that you start to think about other examples that have touched you. I've been very happy to have that be the case. That many people have said, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that as puppet theater. Now let me look at this differently." So many books have been written about Jim Henson's life and artistic output. But this book is actually the first to explore just his love of this field of puppet theater, which, as I said, I love and I know he loved. And it really shows some of his dedication and love of the field. And that was actually one of my chief motivations. I thought it was a time for that part of the story to be told. And it is very much a part of the story of the festivals. This slide shows Jim and Jane Henson. They really got started in the 1950s. They were doing a lot of short, sassy commercials. And this one shows Wilkins and Wonkins. And Wilkins is Wilkins because he will drink Wilkins coffee, and Wilkins, therefore, is saying, "No, I won't." But Wilkins, very persuasive, and has a little cannon if it needs more persuasion. So that's in 1958, Jim Henson took a trip to Europe, and he at that point, believe it or not, wasn't sure he wanted to make puppetry his career. He wasn't sure if he wanted to do just television, which is actually what he first got involved with puppetry for. Television, visual arts, puppetry, he really didn't know. And he didn't know what the larger field looked like. So in 1958, he traveled to Europe, and we really don't know. He kept good notes about a lot of things and took some pictures of things that he saw there. We don't know exactly what he saw that turned him on so much in 1958, but this is one of the artists that was working at that time, and you can see was working very experimentally. This is Fred Schneckenberger, and these are, in English, it's the green and the yellow, the three women, but they're made of different umbrella parts and various sundry. So obviously Jim ended up doing all three. This is taken at Charleville-Mézières. Charleville-Mézières, France is the Puppet Institute, and Jim went to teach a class there, teach a 3-week workshop actually, and which was taking a lot of time out of his schedule, and it was a very important thing for him and certainly for all of the people that took part in it. Then following a beautiful foreword by Cheryl Henson, I give a short introduction of my start in puppetry. People always say, "Oh, were you doing puppets when you were a kid?" And actually I was not. And I found that most of the artists that I was talking with, they did not either. I very much came to it as an adult. There are, of course, wonderful examples of puppeteers. I don't mean to put it down. There are wonderful examples of puppeteers who knew at the age of 5 that that's what they wanted to do, but not the majority. Anyway, I was a college student at University of Vermont. I was studying. I was a French major. And as a French major, I was studying French existential theater, which included Ubu and Ionesco and Rhinoceros. Not exactly most people would think the way into puppetry, but somehow that visual theater combined with the fact that this is Peter Schumann on the left. This is the Bread and Puppet Theater was already a very big influence in Vermont, and certainly a huge influence over time to many of the artists in this field. So somehow the combination for me fused into my brain, and I decided that puppetry was the medium that I wanted to pursue. I came back to New York, from New York. I came back to New York and studied with Penny Jones, a wonderful New York puppeteer. I worked with Eric Bass and at the Theater of the Open Eye, which is Gene Erdman and Joseph Campbell's theater. So that was wonderful. I figured I got paid in occasional Joseph Campbell lectures, which was not too bad. And then I went to work for Bill Baird. I was at that point still in college. I was at Hunter College at that point. And I saw a poster hanging up for an intern. Bill Baird was looking for an intern. So I actually took the poster down and brought it with me to interview for the internship, which I got and which turned into a wonderful job with him for a couple of years. Bill was an incredible human being and incredible artist. And this is a little sketch that he did for me in the front of my book, my copy of his book, The Art of the Puppet. He would sketch on everything. If you went to lunch with him, he'd be sketching on the napkins. It was quite a privilege to be around that. Soon after, in 1976, actually, I went to my first international puppet festival, and it was in Moscow. This is the Obraztsov Theater. That clock in the center, each of the doors opens for a different hour and a different figure comes out. It was quite startling for someone to come to this place where this is the State Theater, and there are huge casts, incredible stages. They had surround sound, which I don't think most of the theaters here, regular theaters, had, and to have that in a puppet theater was quite extraordinary. And actually, at that festival in 1976, only one American performed. It was Dick Myers. So in 1980, the opportunity came. Jim Henson with Nancy Staub, an important person in the puppetry field, decided to do this festival. Actually, they petitioned to be doing the UNIMA Festival. UNIMA is the International Organization of Puppeteers, and they have a congress every 4 years held in a different place. And this was the first time that it was being held in the United States. So in 1980, Nancy made it very clear that it was going to be half US artists and half international, which was a major step forward. And actually, Cheryl talks about the fact that later on, the next 4 years was in Dresden, and at that there was a healthy mix of some of the artists that we later presented. This is actually, I mentioned Julie Taymor before with Lion King. This was the first work I ever saw of hers. This was at the 1980 festival, and these are Indonesian shadow puppets that she used for a production called Way of Snow. Then I went soon after that, I went to work for the Henson Company. And the first project I was brought in, I was actually brought in for a 6-week freelance assignment. I was there 24 years, so it kind of worked out differently. But this is Emmett Otter. If you haven't seen this show, it's at Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas. It's absolutely delightful. And my job was actually to make those little shoes. You see, that's why his foot is very prominent in this. I was casting sculpting and casting little shoes, because for this show, Jim wanted it to be marionettes, which is puppets on strings, so that their feet would actually be showing. If you've watched Muppet Show and Sesame Street, most of them don't have feet. So they didn't normally need shoes. But for this one, they did. So I was brought in to do that, and I made a lot of little birds. And then I continued for a while in the workshop. And then I started doing our exhibitions. At first, the first exhibition was actually at the Library of Performing Arts at Lincoln Center. The first one was for the first Muppet movie. And I was assisting the person who was designing the exhibit at that point and getting the puppets ready for display. That turned into my directing the program. And in 1983, when The Dark Crystal was released, this is a tableau of it for an exhibit that I did again at the Library of Performing Arts. But this time we had, at that point, it was before they renovated, and it was a full second floor. It was a huge space. And what was fun about this for me was that if you've seen Dark Crystal, you know how rich, or even just looking at this image, you can see how richly defined the world is, down to the implements they're using, forks and knives. Nothing is simple. And so I decided to do the show as an archaeological dig. I pretended that they were things that I had found from an ancient civilization and that we were displaying for the first time. At the same time, I did an exhibit at the Craft and Folk Art Museum, which is now called Craft Contemporary in Los Angeles. And there, obviously, we focused on the objects themselves and their incredible beauty. Then now I'm going to switch into really talking about the festivals. This was for the first festival in 1992. And I do talk in the book. I wasn't going to talk about it so much here, but I'll just mention it. As I did say earlier, Jim Henson died in 1990. So when we first started planning these, he was very much present. And this show, Herman by Theater and Wind, was a show that Jim and Cheryl saw performed at a festival at MIT in Boston. And he got so excited about it. They both got so excited about it that it was really the start. That was in 1989. That was really the start of the idea that we should do a festival in New York. Now, I'm told that actually when the festival first happened in 1980 in Washington, it was always in the back of people's minds, certainly in the back of Nancy's mind, I think in Jim's, to have a companion festival that would be in New York. Washington was going to be for all of the funding possibilities, and New York would be for the audiences and critical reviews. So this was definitely the first show that we decided to do when we said we would go forward with a festival. Also, partly because of my connection to them and everybody's love of Bread and Puppet Theater, we wanted to open up with a bang, and we didn't think a parade would work too well on Lafayette Street. So we invited Bread and Puppet Theater to do a two-part production. And this is obviously in front of the Joseph Papp Public Theater, where they did part one, and then they went to Washington Square Park for the second half of it. Paul Zaloom, a wonderful zany character. And obviously there are many, many productions. I've only selected a few to represent each of the different festivals here. I have this one because I think it's funny, and the image there of that giant spider is actually done on it's done on a flat screen. It's an overhead projector that they used to use in schools. And I think schools stopped using them a long time ago, but all of the puppeteers use them a lot. This actually is just a really great example, again, of what puppetry can do better than humans. I will go that far, better than humans, because in this, it's a version of a classic story, The Adding Machine by Elmer Rice. But in it, Mrs. Zero, who is sitting at her dressing table here, is nagging Mr. Zero. And what happens in the course of it is the lips detach and they become giant. And the only thing you can see is these giant lips. And it kind of gets the point across in a way that you couldn't any other way. We also, this is the Just for Kids series. When we started the festivals, our idea was really, it was going to be very hard line. We were going to be just theater for adults. And we were almost done with that brochure that I showed at the beginning. And we also all of a sudden sat there, and Cheryl and I thought, wait a second, we're talking puppets, we're talking Henson. Maybe this isn't so smart. Maybe we need to have something for kids. The last thing we wanted was 5-year-olds in one of our adult productions. So rather than having to say no, 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 it was important to have something that they could go and see. That would also be high quality. And so this became the Just for Kids series. And what we found was that people said, on every page of the brochure, it said for adults, for adults, for adults. But it wasn't until they got to the page that said Just for Kids that they said, oh, you mean the others weren't? And they'd go back and look at it. It didn't matter how many times we wrote for adults. Just saying Just for Kids as a separate section really solved the problem. So it was very important to us also that we were really explaining a whole field. Lectures, symposia, exhibitions were all part of that, not just the performances. They were part to actually augment the whole story and really to deepen the conversation. I mentioned wanting to get wanting to get reviewed, but in fact, we really felt that we needed to educate the reviewers. We really needed them to have a context for what they were looking at. So this is one of the many panels. This happens to be Cheryl Henson moderating puppetry as personal expression, puppeteers Roman Posca, Janie Geiser, theater director Peter Sellers, and Eric Bass, and apparently Enno was there also, but we don't have him in the picture. For the exhibition that year, we actually brought an exhibit from the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta called Breaking Boundaries, which was showing a lot of the artists that we were actually showing in the first festivals. But we were able to expand it for this large space at Lincoln Center. And this is a production by Hannah Tierney, New York-based artist, and her piece called Incidental Pieces for Satin and Strings, based on a Heinrich von Kleist essay about artists learning from the beauty of the marionette, and dancers being able to learn what it really meant to have balance, what it really meant to have freedom. And anyway, so we had this performed right in the exhibition space, which was very exciting. For a first festival, we certainly did not expect to win the awards that we did. We had got an Obie award for special presentation and a Drama Desk award. And that kind of changed things, because initially we were only going to do one festival, and it was only going to be a tribute to Jim, and we would do one festival. And after the success of this, the board agreed that we should continue. So for the second festival, this is a production called of Ghost Sonata, Strindberg's Ghost Sonata, by a company from Sweden called Marionette Theatern, directed and with puppets by Roman Posca. This is me a while ago introducing a panel that was kind of this was our all-star cast. So the panel was actually, I was just introducing it. The panel was actually moderated by Eileen Blumenthal, and it included theater director Andre Saban, Hannah Tierney, Julie Taymor, William Cartridge, and Ping Chong. So clearly having artists of that caliber made a big difference in how people perceived of these festivals. This was the exhibition for the second festival. It's called Revealing Roots. And the idea was that we were showing some of the classic traditional work and what it spawned, how it inspired some of the contemporary work. But the basic idea for me was that we were showing people that we weren't taking something that was broken. We weren't taking some child's toy and trying to make it be for adults. We were actually rekindling or going back to the powerful roots of this art form and bringing it forward in a new contemporary form for American audiences. We got a lot of press. Cheryl's actually responsible for most of that. She went running around doing a lot of interviews. So this certainly helped our effort. Um, in 1996, I really wanted to do an extensive exploration of everybody who'd ever thought about doing anything with puppets. And I have a colleague that I had worked with in Munich, and I told him who had the wonderful collection at the City Museum, the Stadtmuseum in Munich. And I told him what I wanted to do, and he said, "Oh, the name dropping exhibit. Yeah, we could help you with that." So he helped us. And for me, it was important to come full circle to Ubuwa, but in reality, it was the 100th anniversary of Obu being performed. So it was a very important starting point for this exhibition, which I co-curated with John Bell, who's now the head of the center in the Ballard Museum in Storrs, Connecticut, and with Barbara Stratton, who was then the director of exhibits at the library. These are two versions, contemporary versions of Ubuwa. On the left, Michael Meshka, on the right, Joan Baixas, and he worked in collaboration with Joan Miro for this. So again, I was doing the name dropping exhibit, but it was true. All of these people had done things with it. Paul Klee had made puppets, and we had them in this show. This is a figure from Alexandra Exter. Had actually small marionettes. She's a Russian constructivist, but this was one that was used kind of as a billboard. The actual marionettes were too fragile, but we were able to borrow this large figure. And then in the back, you can see image in the center is from Perrot. We had quite extensive collection. This is the only slide that has pictures that are not in the book, but I thought it was important just quickly to show the scope of the exhibition. On the left, we have 3 versions of Oedipus, Raymond Bufano, Julie Taymor for the opera Oedipus, and Bread and Puppet Theater. And then on the right, it went everything from that to stop motion animation. So we had figures from James and the Giant Peach and some of the other films. To mention for that exhibit, I don't have a slide of it, but one of the artists that was included in my name dropping everybody who had ever done anything exhibit was Sophie Tauber-Arp, who is AKA Jean Arp's wife, but she's an incredible artist in her own right. And actually MoMA is going to be having an exhibit of her work starting in November, and I highly recommend seeing it. So these are a couple of highlights from the '98 festival. This is Kaidan by Ping Chong, international collaboration with Japanese artist Mitsuru Ishii and Atlanta Center for Puppetry Arts based artist John Ludwig. And the reason I pulled this one is that Ping has a very cinematic background, and you can see in this the whole idea of framing in these the camera eye. And he played a lot with scale, which is another thing that puppetry does very, very well. This is Never Been Anywhere, Sandglass Theater, Eric Bass and his company. And this is here again for the inventiveness of puppetry. That horse is made out of just a bunch of logs. And when you see them on stage, first you see the pile of logs, then you see the puppeteers pick them up and make this horse in front of your eyes. And they're no longer a pile of logs. It's definitely a horse at that point. This is the 5th and last festival. This was in 2000. You can see it was September 6th through 24th, 2000. At the bottom of the brochure, you can see all of the different partners we were working with at that point. It started out with just working with the public theater, but over time we started working with more and more New York theaters. And the reason for that was that it had never been our intention for the foundation, the Henson Foundation, to be doing festivals forever. We really wanted to prime the pump, if you will, and have then there be all of these theaters that would show this work. And so most of the theaters at the bottom there, you can see La Mama already had a tradition of showing some puppet theater, but most of the others did not. So it was very important to expand that out. And now the foundation actually helps with some presenting grants to keep this all going. This is, I mentioned him before, the director of The Ring, and Robert Lepage performed his solo work, The Far Side of the Moon, and this had music by Laurie Anderson. This is Ronnie Burkett from Canada, and what was important, well, it's a wonderful piece, and we had presented him with an earlier piece as well, but what was really significant for us in the development of the festival was that it was offered a 3-week run at New York Theater Workshop, which is very major, and a major accomplishment for the field. The last 2 chapters get into where are we now. So this is the beginning of chapter 9. It just shows highlights of some of the artists that we had presented and what are they doing now. It was very important to me that the book not end, although it was framed for the festivals, that it not end and say, oh, well, we did that and it's done. And we solved all the problems and there's nothing left to say. Puppet theater is a very vibrant and continuing art form. And it was very important to me that we show some of what's happening today and some of the organizations that are keeping that work moving forward. So I already told you that I had interviewed 35 different artists. It ended up with things peppered throughout the book. This is actually Basil Twist, who I mentioned earlier, with Symphony Fantastique. He did a number of dance productions. Actually, recently he did something with the comic opera in Paris, but this was one of the dance pieces. He worked also with the Joffrey and with Christopher Wheeldon. Dan Hurlin won the Rome Prize. Actually, both Basil and Dan won the Rome Prize, which is a significant achievement. And while Dan was in Rome, for that, he found these obscure plays that had actually never been done, futurist plays, and he just did them fairly recently at Bard. It was wonderful. This is Roman Posca's Dead Puppet Talk, which was performed at the Kitchen with narration by Bill Irwin, known more as the clown and actor, but he was very instrumental in this. And I do mention, Roman always has these incredibly beautiful costumes. His partner is Donna Zakowsko, costume designer. Most recently, she's known for A Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. All those incredible costumes in that. Same attention has been done for these puppet costumes. Janie Geiser in a piece that was a film, which was recently shown at the National Gallery of Art. Elizabeth King, whose image was on the brochure for the 5th festival. This was a piece that she did recently at Mass MoCA. Well, actually not so recently now, it's 2017, where she was showing how animation actually unfolds. And then this is Heather Henson, Jim's youngest daughter, did a piece called a G-Jack on Turtle Island, which was done at the New Victory Theater, and it's incredible production. And what I think is really important about it also is that in this time that we're in, where people are really trying to be much more aware than maybe we have been in the past, or than we have been in the past, of different cultures, and not doing the American thing of appropriating, I want this, but really working with them. Heather has been very dedicated to working on environmental themes and working with Native cultures. This is the last chapter, chapter 10. This is a production called Chimpanzee. And I only had it there because it's a fabulous production, but also because it shows some of the different funding that the foundation has been doing through following pieces through their development. This is at La Mama, Duda Paiva, a wonderful production. La Mama has now a puppet festival. This is at the Under the Radar Festival at the Public Theater, a production called Chambre Noire by Plexus Polaire. And what I love about this is that Mark Russell, who is the creator of the Under the Radar Festival, artistic director, was one of our partners at PS 122 when we were doing those festivals. And he kept it alive for. It became so much a part of his understanding of the full spectrum of theater that he wouldn't think of doing a festival without there being some puppetry in it. So this is at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Waterford, Connecticut. And a wonderful, I mean, people probably know the O'Neill for its development of theater works. This is a once a summer, there's a puppetry conference, and this using the same kind of techniques of development of work. Connecticut actually has both the Eugene O'Neill Theater and the University of Connecticut, which has one of the programs. I think it's the only, at this moment, the only full degree in puppet theater, both on the undergraduate and graduate level. And this is the World Puppetry Collection, Center for Puppetry Arts, showing some of the different range. It's a companion to a permanent exhibition of the world of Jim Henson and many of the characters. If you're in Atlanta, it's a must-see place. So I'm going to end there. This is Jim Henson Presents. I have this because a lot of the productions we videotaped at the time. They've all been digitized now, and they're part of the collection, the Theater on Film and Tape archives at the Library of Performing Arts. So they can be seen, and they are together with this production, Jim Henson Presents The World of Puppetry, which was Jim showing 6 of the different artists from around the world. Thank you to the Perrot, so appreciate it.